Human treated an alien girl without titles or rank, and she realized it was the freedom she sought. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The crimson halls of the royal palace shimmered with an ethereal light, casting a vibrant glow over everything within. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine, blending with the sharp tang of the polished stone floors. Nathan Walker, a human soldier, stood at attention, his boots clicking softly on the cold marble as he awaited his orders. His uniform was simple yet efficient, and although his dark brown hair was neatly combed back, his demeanor showed nothing but professionalism. As a member of the Earth military, he had been tasked with guarding the visiting royal party from the Tan Dominion. He had no idea what exactly this mission would entail, but the pay was good. After his dishonorable discharge from the Earth Defense Force, an unjust move by high-ranking officials to silence him, this was the perfect way to get back on his feet. The palace loomed above him like a titan, its vast, gilded doors opening with an almost imperceptible hum. From within, a tall figure emerged, draped in an intricate robe of silver and crimson. Her skin glowed with a striking red hue, and her piercing blue eyes regarded him with a calculated calmness. This was Queen Nisara, the ruler of the Tan Dominion. She was a commanding presence, a being of immense power and authority, ruling over 17 systems with her indomitable will. But today, it was her clone, the royal proxy, who would be accompanying Nathan on his assignment. The real queen was busy with the crucial matters of state, but this clone, identical in every way, yet stripped of the royal burdens, would take her place for the less formal duties. Her name was Lara. Nathan had been briefed on the necessity of maintaining a professional distance, but as Lara approached, he couldn't help but notice the faint shift in her demeanor, the subtle softness in her gaze. "Commander Walker," she greeted him, extending a slender hand. Her voice was calm, yet warm, and there was an air of grace about her that seemed to transcend the cold walls of the palace. "It is an honor to have you as my personal guard during this diplomatic mission." Nathan took her hand, his grip firm but respectful. "The honor is mine, Your Highness." She smiled, but there was a hint of something deeper in her eyes, something that made Nathan pause. "Please, call me Lara," she said, her voice gentle yet unwavering. "I am not my counterpart, and I do not carry the weight of her title. I prefer to be seen as I am." As they began their walk through the ornate halls, Nathan couldn't help but notice the contrast between them. She was the queen's clone, a mirror of the royal line, yet she carried herself differently. There was no arrogance, no sense of superiority in her posture or words. Instead, she seemed free. Free from the expectations of a throne, free from the weight of centuries-old tradition. The deeper they walked into the palace, the more Nathan noticed this subtle yet profound difference. As they toured the vast galleries and the royal gardens, Nathan treated her not as a queen, not as a ruler, but as a person. He spoke with her casually, laughed at her jokes, and even disagreed with her on a few trivial matters. And with each passing moment, Nathan could see her changing. The walls around her slowly began to crumble, the rigid mask of royalty slipping away as she embraced the freedom that came with being seen as nothing more than an equal. Lara was no longer just a clone. She was becoming someone who could stand on her own, someone who had the freedom to be herself. As they continued their journey through the diplomatic halls, Nathan couldn't help but realize that this mission, this unexpected connection, was far more than he had bargained for. It was changing both of them in ways they hadn't anticipated. I know this is a peculiar way to spend a day, but sometimes, the most meaningful moments come in the most unexpected of places. Nathan couldn't shake that thought as he walked beside Lara through the Tan Dominion's cultural district. The streets were lined with vibrant, otherworldly plants, their leaves shimmering with an iridescent glow. The buildings around them were sleek and curved, constructed from materials Nathan had never seen before, radiating a soft, ambient light that seemed to pulse with life. Yet, despite the beauty around him, Nathan's mind kept drifting back to Lara. The more time they spent together, the more he realized how different she was from the cold, distant queen he had been briefed to protect. Lara moved with an effortless grace, yet there was something raw, almost human, in the way she took in the world around her. She didn't walk like a queen. She walked like someone discovering freedom for the first time. As they passed through the heart of the district, Lara paused in front of a holographic art display that seemed to capture the essence of human history, the revolution, the fight for freedom, and the rise of new beginnings. Nathan noticed how deeply she studied the piece, her fingers almost brushing against the display as though trying to touch the past. "This one," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It reminds me of something I've never truly understood." Nathan stood beside her, watching as she became absorbed in the artwork. "What's that?" he asked, his voice gentle, trying not to disturb her concentration. "The concept of choice," she replied, her voice filled with quiet awe. "I've never had the luxury of making my own choices. Everything has always been laid out for me, my actions dictated by the throne, the expectations of my people. But here, I can choose to look at this piece of art and decide what it means to me. It's a strange feeling, Nathan." Nathan was quiet for a moment, taking in her words. He wasn't sure what to say. He had never truly understood the burden of being a ruler, of living under the weight of expectations. But Lara, standing there in front of that hologram, seemed to be questioning everything she had ever known. And for the first time in their time together, Nathan realized that she wasn't just a clone. She wasn't just the queen's copy. She was someone who could think for herself, who could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders, and yet still sought something more. "I think it's one of the hardest things to come to terms with," he said after a long pause. "The idea that you have control over your own life. It takes time, but it's worth it." Lara turned to him, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. "Do you really believe that?" she asked, her voice almost childlike. "That we can change the way we live?" Nathan nodded. "I do. You're not bound by the throne, Lara. You're free to choose your own path." She smiled, but it was soft, almost as though she were testing the weight of his words. "I don't know where my path will lead," she said, her voice quiet. "But for the first time, I think I'm willing to find out." As they continued their walk through the district, something between them shifted. It was subtle at first, just a slight change in the way they moved together, a quiet understanding that passed between them. Nathan was no longer just the soldier assigned to protect her. He was becoming her companion, someone she could trust. And as they passed by more holographic displays, more art and culture of humanity, Lara began to ask questions, genuinely curious about the people and the world she had never known. "What's it like to be human?" she asked suddenly, her gaze steady on Nathan. He laughed softly, unsure of how to answer such a question. "It's messy," he said finally, "but it's real. We make mistakes, but we learn. We live with the consequences, and sometimes that's the only thing that matters." Lara looked at him thoughtfully, a spark of something. Maybe hope, maybe curiosity, lighting up her eyes. "Messy," she repeated, as though she were savoring the word. "I like that." And just like that, Nathan knew. This journey they were on wasn't just about diplomacy or royal duties. It was about two souls, discovering a new world, and perhaps discovering each other along the way. "I have to admit, it's strange," Lara said as she walked beside Nathan, her voice thoughtful. "This world, it's so full of life, so full of choices. I've spent my whole existence under the weight of expectations, and now, I'm here, free, or at least, I think I am." Nathan glanced at her, seeing the quiet vulnerability in her expression. She wasn't used to this freedom, this autonomy, and it made him realize how far they had both come. Just a few weeks ago, she had been a queen, bound by tradition and royal duties. Now, she was a woman exploring a world she had never known, with the chance to live by her own choices. "It's not easy, that's for sure," Nathan replied, his voice steady. "But you've already taken the hardest step. You've broken away from what others expect of you." Lara looked up at him, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "And what about you, Nathan? What is it that drives you?" He was silent for a moment, the question catching him off guard. No one had asked him that in a long time. "I suppose I just want to do what's right," he said slowly. "I want to make sure that when all is said and done, I can look back and know I helped people. That's all." Lara nodded, absorbing his words. They reached a small park nestled within the cultural district, the soft hum of distant music blending with the peaceful atmosphere. Nathan and Laura sat on a bench, the quiet sounds of nature surrounding them. For the first time since they had arrived in the city, Laura looked at ease, the tension in her shoulders finally releasing. "I think I understand now," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the gentle movement of the trees around them. What you said, this is what freedom feels like. Not just the absence of rules or expectations, but the ability to decide for yourself, without fear of judgment or consequence." Nathan smiled, his gaze turning to the horizon as he reflected on her words. "Exactly. It's about living without feeling like you're confined to a set path." Laura let out a small sigh, as if a weight had been lifted from her. "I've spent my life surrounded by rules and expectations, but now, I see how much I've been missing. I can't even remember the last time I made a choice for myself, one that wasn't tied to my role as a queen." "Well," Nathan said with a grin, "you're doing it now. And that's a good start." Laura turned to look at him, her expression softening. "I think I've spent too long living in the shadow of what others think I should be. It's time for me to find out who I really am." The words hung in the air between them, a silent agreement passing between them. It was a quiet moment, but it was a turning point for both of them. They were no longer just a soldier and his charge. They were two people, each seeking something more than what they had been given. Lara's eyes met Nathan's, a flicker of understanding passing between them. "I'm glad you're here," she said quietly. Nathan didn't answer immediately, but his smile was enough. He didn't need to say anything. They both knew that, no matter what happened next, they had each other to rely on. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the park, Laura felt something shift inside her, a sense of peace, of belonging, that she hadn't known she was missing. And as they sat there in silence, she realized that the future, whatever it held, was hers to shape. With Nathan by her side, she finally had the freedom to choose. It's been weeks since that day in the park. Laura felt a sense of change within herself, like something deep inside had shifted, and she was beginning to see the world differently. Nathan, always steady and reliable, had become more than just a protector. He had become a friend, someone she could confide in, someone who treated her as an equal, not as a symbol of power or royalty. It was an odd feeling, but it was liberating, and she wasn't sure when the walls she had so carefully built around herself had started to crumble. They had spent the last several days in the city, moving between cultural events and meetings, with Nathan always by her side. But it wasn't the events or the people they met that stood out to Laura. It was the quiet moments, the ones spent in each other's company, when they didn't have to pretend to be anything they weren't. As they sat together that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the world felt vast and open, a place full of endless possibilities. "What do you think comes next?" Laura asked, her voice soft, almost as if she were asking herself the question, but Nathan answered her. "Whatever you want." She turned to look at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. He always had a way of making everything feel simpler, even when the world was anything but. "I think I want to stay here," Laura said after a pause, her voice thoughtful. "For a while, to see what it's like, to make my own choices, not just for myself, but for the future." Nathan didn't respond immediately. He didn't have to. He simply nodded, the understanding between them clear. They both knew what it meant. Laura was no longer bound by her title. She had the freedom to live, to decide her future. And for the first time, that freedom didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a gift. They continued walking in silence, side by side, not needing to speak. The city around them buzzed with life, but in that moment, it felt as if the two of them were in their own world, separated from the rest of the universe. They had found something rare, something worth holding on to. As they reached the edge of the city, where the lights faded into the quiet of the open fields beyond, Laura stopped. "I never thought I'd feel like this," she said, her voice tinged with wonder. Free, not just from the weight of the throne, but free from all the expectations. From everything I thought I had to be. Nathan looked at her, his expression soft. "I think that's the most important part of freedom," he said. "Realizing that you're not who others expect you to be. You're who you choose to be." Laura smiled, a real smile this time, not just the polite smile of royalty, but a smile that reached her eyes. "I think I'm starting to understand that." As they continued walking, The world stretched out before them, filled with endless possibilities. Nathan didn't know what the future would hold for either of them, but he knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, they would face it together. For the first time in a long while, Lara felt like she was no longer a prisoner of her own life. She was living it on her terms, and that was more than she had ever hoped for. As the days passed, Lara found herself growing more comfortable in her new life. She had settled into a routine, one where she could make her own choices and take control of her future. Nathan remained by her side, supporting her without reservation. Their conversations had shifted from small talk to deeper discussions about their hopes, fears, and the future. It was in these quiet moments that Lara felt something she hadn't in a long time. A sense of peace. She wasn't weighed down by the expectations of her people or the constant pressure of her title. She was simply herself. One afternoon, as they sat together in the park, Lara asked Nathan a question that had been lingering in her mind. "Nathan, do you ever wonder what it would be like if you didn't have to live by someone else's rules?" Nathan leaned back on the bench, looking up at the sky. The question caught him off guard, but he didn't hesitate before answering. "I think about it sometimes. I used to think I had to follow orders, had to live up to the expectations others had for me. But over time, I realized I didn't want to just be another cog in the machine. I wanted to make my own choices, to live my own life." Lara nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "And what happens if we fail?" she asked softly. Nathan smiled, his voice steady. "If we fail, then we learn from it. We pick ourselves up and try again. But living a life controlled by others, that's the real failure." Lara's gaze softened, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I think I'm starting to understand that." She had always been taught that her life was not her own, that every decision was made with her people's best interests in mind. But now, for the first time, she was beginning to see a different way of living, a way that didn't rely on her title or the weight of her lineage. It was a way that allowed her to grow as a person, to choose her own path. As the evening sun began to dip below the horizon, Lara turned to Nathan. "I'm not sure what the future holds," she said, her voice soft. "But for the first time, I feel like I have a chance to choose it." Nathan looked at her, his expression sincere. "You always did," he said quietly. "You just had to see it for yourself." They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the city fading into the background as they both reflected on the journey they had been on. They had come so far, and yet, it felt like they were just getting started. Lara felt a sense of clarity that she hadn't known was possible. She was no longer bound by the expectations of others, and with Nathan's unwavering support, she was ready to embrace whatever came next. It was a new chapter, one that would be written by her own hand. As they stood up to leave, Lara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. She didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time, she was ready to face it. With Nathan by her side, she knew she was no longer alone. Together, they would face the unknown, and together, they would find a way to make their own destiny. The days had begun to blend into each other, as Lara settled more and more into the life she had longed for. It had been a week since her conversation with Nathan in the park, and every day brought a new discovery about the world, about herself, and about the people she had once ruled over. She had spent most of her time exploring the city, finding quiet moments away from the royal duties that had once defined her existence. Nathan was always there by her side, like a steady anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Lara had never imagined that freedom could be so simple. As they walked through the streets one afternoon, Lara was lost in thought, the gentle hum of the city filling her ears. "Nathan," she began, her voice thoughtful, "do you ever think about where you're going? About your future?" Nathan glanced at her, his gaze soft. "All the time," he replied. "But it's not about having everything figured out. It's about taking one step at a time, about finding your own way, even when you don't have all the answers." Lara nodded slowly, her mind absorbing his words. It wasn't something she had considered before. As a queen, her path had been set for her. But now, every choice felt like it could lead her down a new road, one she had the power to shape herself. "I think I've been so focused on what I had to do for everyone else that I never stopped to think about what I wanted," Lara said quietly, her voice tinged with regret. "But now, I see that I do have a choice. I'm not just a figurehead. I'm me, and I can be who I want to be." Nathan smiled, the warmth in his eyes reflecting the genuine Pride he felt for her. Exactly, he said. You're not just a queen. You're a person. And that person gets to decide what happens next. They walked on in silence, the weight of his words settling into her chest. They passed a small park, the green grass swaying in the breeze, and for the first time in a long while, Lara felt a deep sense of calm. She had been so consumed by duty for so many years that she had forgotten what it felt like to just exist, to be present, to be free. As they sat on a nearby bench, Lara looked around, taking in the small details of the world she had once ignored. The sunlight filtering through the trees, the laughter of children playing in the distance, the soft rustle of the leaves in the breeze. It was peaceful, and for the first time, Lara allowed herself to fully enjoy it. I never thought I'd feel this way, she admitted. Like I could just be, without all the pressure. Nathan gave her a knowing look. It takes time, he said softly. But it's worth it. You're allowed to be yourself, Lara. And you're allowed to take your time figuring out who that person is. Lara smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It was a new feeling, this sense of freedom, and it was more than she had ever expected. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue across the city, Lara felt a sense of peace she had never known in all her years as queen. She wasn't bound by anyone's expectations anymore. She wasn't just a ruler. She was Lara, a person with a future she could shape, a future full of endless possibilities. And for the first time, she was ready to embrace it. Together with Nathan, the future was no longer a burden. It was a gift. The days continued to pass, and the sense of freedom that Lara had once feared began to feel more like a second skin, something she could wear comfortably and proudly. As the weeks turned into months, she and Nathan spent more time together, exploring new parts of the city, enjoying the small moments that, to most, might seem insignificant but held deeper meaning for them. One afternoon, as they walked through the busy streets, Lara's mind wandered back to the people she had once ruled over. She thought about her past life, her role as the queen, and the weight of the crown that she had abandoned. Do you ever miss it? Lara asked suddenly, her voice soft. Nathan looked at her, his brow furrowing in thought. Miss what? Being in charge, she explained, her tone curious. I don't know if I ever truly had a choice before. Everything was decided for me. But now I'm free to make my own choices. I never thought I'd be okay with that. Nathan paused for a moment, as if considering her question. I think you've always had a choice, he said finally. It just wasn't always clear to you. Lara looked at him, her eyes searching his face for understanding. What do you mean? Nathan smiled softly. Even when you were on the throne, you were making choices. You just weren't choosing for yourself. You were choosing for your people, for the throne. But you were always in control. You just had to find your way back to it. Lara absorbed his words, letting them settle in her mind. She had never thought of it that way. She had always seen her life as one of obligation, of sacrifice, and now that she was free from those chains, she didn't know how to navigate her new life. She had spent so many years living for others that the idea of living for herself seemed foreign. I've spent so much of my life trying to be who others expected me to be, Lara admitted, her voice quiet. I'm not sure who I am anymore. Nathan's expression softened, his voice gentle as he spoke. I think that's the beauty of it, Lara. You get to decide now. You don't have to be anyone but yourself. And that's more than enough. They continued walking, the city bustling around them, but it felt as if they were in their own little world. Lara felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before, a quiet understanding that she was no longer bound by anyone's expectations. She was free to choose, to be herself, and that was something she had never thought possible. That evening, as they sat together in the park once more, the world seemed to slow down. The sky was painted in hues of pink and orange, the air warm with the last light of the day. Lara leaned back against the bench, her gaze fixed on the horizon. I used to think freedom meant being able to do whatever I wanted, she said softly. But now, I realize it's about more than that. It's about knowing you can make your own choices, no matter what. And it's about finding peace in that freedom. Nathan nodded, his eyes reflecting the same understanding. It's a journey, he said, one step at a time. But you're not alone in it, Lara. You never were. As they sat there, the sounds of the city fading into the background, Lara realized just how far she had come. She was no longer the queen she once was. She was something more, something entirely her own. And with Nathan by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next, knowing she had the strength to choose her own path, her own future. Whatever that future held, it was hers to create. As the weeks turned into months, Lara and Nathan's bond deepened, and each day felt more like a discovery. Lara had embraced her new life with open arms, and while there were days when the weight of her past would try to creep in, she found solace in the simple moments. The conversations with Nathan, the peaceful walks through the city, and the quiet times of reflection. They had reached a place in their journey where neither of them needed to speak much to understand the other. It was a comfortable silence that had settled between them, one that allowed them to just be. One afternoon, as they stood by the river that ran through the city, Lara looked out over the water, watching the gentle current move past. The sun was low in the sky, casting a soft golden glow over the scene. "Do you ever think about the past?" Lara asked, her voice soft, almost as if she were speaking to herself. Nathan stood beside her, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket. "I think about it sometimes," he said, his gaze steady. "But I don't let it define me. I've made peace with it, just like I'm sure you will." Lara turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "It's strange, you know," she said, her voice quiet. "For so long, my life was dictated by other people's expectations. I never had a chance to make my own choices. And now, it's like I'm starting over. But even though I'm free, there's still a part of me that wonders if I'm doing the right thing." Nathan looked at her, his expression kind and understanding. "You're doing exactly what you're meant to be doing. You're living for yourself, Lara. And that's more than most people ever get to do." Lara's gaze softened as she took in his words. It was true, she realized. She wasn't bound by the throne anymore, or by anyone's expectations. She was free to make her own choices, and that in itself was a gift. "I never thought it would feel like this," Lara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like I have a future I can shape. Like I have a chance to be who I really am." Nathan smiled, the warmth in his eyes matching the soft glow of the setting sun. "You always had a future," he said. "It was just waiting for you to take it." The moment stretched on, peaceful and serene, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Lara allowed herself to feel the weight of her past lift. She had come a long way from the person she had once been, and as she stood by the river, side by side with Nathan, she realized that this was just the beginning. There was still so much to discover, so much to explore. The future was no longer a mystery. It was a path she could walk, and she didn't have to walk it alone. As they turned to leave, the sun finally dipped below the horizon, casting a soft twilight over the city. Lara felt a sense of calm wash over her, knowing that whatever lay ahead, she was ready. And as Nathan walked beside her, his steady presence offering her the quiet strength she needed, she realized that this was the life she had always wanted. A life where she could make her own choices, a life where she was free to be herself. Together, they would face whatever came next, knowing that the future was theirs to create. The seasons began to change, bringing with them a new sense of calm and routine. Lara and Nathan had found a rhythm in their lives, one where they balanced quiet moments with new experiences, each day becoming a new chapter in the life they were now building together. For the first time in her life, Lara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The world no longer felt like a place where she was meant to fit into someone else's mold. She was creating her own future, step by step. One afternoon, as they strolled through the city's bustling market district, Lara turned to Nathan with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about what we've accomplished?" she asked. Nathan glanced at her, a small smile playing on his lips. "I think we've only just begun," he replied, his voice filled with a quiet confidence. Lara laughed softly. "It feels like so much has changed in such a short time." "It has," Nathan agreed, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "But sometimes the best changes come in small steps. You're free now, Lara. You get to decide what happens next." The words hung in the air between them, a quiet reminder of how far she had come. It wasn't just her freedom that had changed. It was her outlook on life. Lara had spent so much of her time as a queen, focusing on duties and obligations, that she had never truly understood what it meant to live freely. But now, as she walked beside Nathan, every moment felt like a fresh start. "I never thought I could feel like this," Lara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like I'm not defined by my past anymore. Like I'm just me." Nathan smiled at her, his expression full of understanding. You always were just you, he said gently. You just needed the space to realize it. They continued walking, the sounds of the market fading into the background as they moved forward together. For the first time, Lara felt as if she was truly living, not bound by anything or anyone. As they passed by a small cafe, Nathan stopped and looked at her with a mischievous glint in his eyes. How about we sit for a while, he suggested. You know, we don't have to rush anywhere. We can just enjoy the moment. Lara nodded, her heart light. I'd like that. They found a small table by the window, the sun casting a warm glow over the street. As they sat, Lara realized just how much she had changed. She wasn't the same person who had once been shackled by her title. She wasn't defined by her past or the expectations of those around her. She was Lara, someone who had the power to shape her own future. And as she looked across the table at Nathan, she knew that whatever came next, she was ready. They had come so far together, and the journey ahead was one she was no longer afraid of. In fact, she was excited for it. As the day wore on, Lara and Nathan spoke about everything and nothing, their conversation flowing easily between them. There was no agenda, no pressure, just two people enjoying each other's company, and for Lara, that was enough. She had everything she needed right here, in this moment. And for the first time, that was all that mattered.